the idea of the growth of democracy in Ukraine as a stimulus for investment, is it something that people pay lip service to only, or is it genuinely something that would persuade more and more people to come into the market?
Well, I think the thing that comes along with the quote-unquote democracy is, and the biggest thing for investors, is predictability and stability, especially within the regulatory and the legislative environment. One of the things that has happened over the years since 2005 has been a constantly changing and constantly moving goalposts. The rules of the game change and have changed, and that has been part of that has been due to the fact that the average length of a government in Ukraine since independence has been 8 months. And so new governments come in, they have new priorities. To this point, there's been very little long-term strategic thinking in regards to where the country is going to go and how we're going to get there. So I think for the business community, there still is a need and a desire for democracy that will bring with it predictability and stability, so that we understand what the rules of the game are, so that we can then understand how to play the game effectively.
Now, Tomasz, in his inauguration speech, President Yanukovych spoke about rebuilding trust in Ukraine amongst the international financial institutions and individual international investors. Now, what would you put as the priorities in that process of rebuilding trust? If you were a presidential advisor, what would you be saying we need to focus on at this stage?
Well, it's some of the issues that Jorge has mentioned. It's the question of predictability and stability, especially of the legislation and regulation. The investors are making the investment into the Ukraine economy for the long term, and they want to understand that the environment under which they make the investment will be there in 5 years and 10 years and so on. Another important thing is the fiscal policy. What you see all over the world these days, in order to fight the crisis, there has been the government debt has been increased significantly. Governments all over the world have been running significant budget deficits to support the economy at the time when the private consumption was contracting substantially. But they ran up quite significant deficits and debts to GDP. That was the case in Ukraine as well. Ukraine used to have debt to GDP of roughly 12%. It has increased over the last 2 years to 33% of GDP, which is still a very healthy figure. In international comparison, it's one of the lowest levels of debt, but the pace of increase has been pretty sharp, and it is very important for the new administration to focus on cutting the pace, cutting the deficit this and next year, give the needed boost to the private sector, so that the private sector takes over the baton and runs the economy by itself without this extra government help. I think that is very important, that will make investors much more confident if the new government will focus on these issues. And this is something that Mr. Yanukovych mentioned in his inauguration speech, and that was quite important to bring the state finances under tighter control, which has been the case in Ukraine, quite frankly, since 2000 until late 2008. That has been the case. Ukraine has run a very conservative fiscal policy, which has been appreciated by international investors. Another issue that he mentioned that is quite important for us and for investors is the issue of corruption. Ukraine ranks very unfavorably in the international ratings of corruption. It occupies one of the last places, and here I think for the new government it would be very important to fight this problem effectively and make sure that Ukraine moves up over the next 5 years in those ratings to at least the 60th place from the currently 120 or 130.
Yeah, because if you look at the ratings in these sort of areas, corruption and free press, etc., democracy, Ukraine has moved up significantly in the free press area and democracy areas, but in the corruption area it seems to have gone backwards to an extent.
That's one of the big disappointments of the Orange Revolution, that the new people that came into power have unfortunately not improved in this area, and the corruption and the ratings in terms of corruption, Ukraine has been stuck where it was pre-Orange Revolution. And that's something that we would hope the new administration would address, because less corruption means more growth, it means higher GDP per capita, it means higher wages for people who live here.